They laughed at Earth. Not out of fear or nervous admiration, but real, belly-shaking laughter. The Galactic Coalition, a sprawling alliance of interstellar species and supercivilizations, saw Earth as an evolutionary misfire, an accidental blue marble, plagued by chaos, inhabited by emotional bipedal apes who still relied on combustion engines and boots to conquer terrain. Earth was a curiosity, a zoological planet wrapped in a choking blanket of forests, deserts, oceans, and weather so violent it frequently tore metal apart. That was how the mockery began. In the planetary war chambers orbiting the glittering city world of Aurelius Prime, high-ranking generals exchanged satirical dossiers on Earth's biomes. An Arklan officer once held up a hologram of the Amazon rainforest and barked with laughter, calling it a living infection. "Humans call this a jungle," he wheezed, "we call it a malfunction of nature." Earth's entry into the interstellar theater had not impressed. Though their signals had rippled into space for decades, when humanity finally achieved FTL travel, it arrived not with grace or diplomacy, but with a jury-rigged freighter that limped into neutral territory, hull cracked and barely held together by magnetic patches. The Coalition dismissed them. No culture with unquantified wilderness zones and outdated kinetic weapons could contribute anything meaningful to galactic progress. Earth was wild, uncultivated, uncivilized. The official stance was non-intervention, but unofficially, Earth was useful. A testbed, a place to stage war games. When a rogue faction within the Coalition, the Zanati Syndicate, sought new resources to fuel their forbidden expansion, they proposed an unauthorized occupation of Earth. The Council looked the other way. The landing was surgical. Shuttles split the clouds and descended with brutal elegance into two of Earth's densest regions, the Peruvian rainforest and the lower Mekong basin. Their logic was unshakable: humans would retreat, and the wilderness, more enemy than ally, would crush any resistance. In the control center aboard the Zanati cruiser Voidrise, General Atharuk peered at his console with a mixture of pride and boredom. Deploy Recon units. Begin vegetation clearance. Map terrain for terraforming. His adjutant hesitated. "Sir, reports indicate high humidity is affecting drone calibration." "Adapt," Atharuk snapped. "Do not come to me with excuses soaked in dew." Within 48 hours, the first casualties arrived. Scout Unit Theta 9 disappeared. No comms. No signal. Their last transmission ended with a static-drenched scream and a crunching sound no one could explain. A day later, Delta 7's atmospheric transport was found cracked in half at the edge of a ravine that hadn't been on any satellite maps. The logs suggested autopilot failure. The text said that wasn't possible. Then came the malfunctions. Servo joints rusted overnight. Scanners gave ghost readings, moving blips with no thermal signature. Troopers slipped on moss that wasn't there the day before. Something was wrong. Not just environmentally. Psychologically. Private Kells, one of the few humans in Coalition service, said it best: the jungle doesn't just live. It listens. Watches. Waits. Atharuk dismissed it as low morale, but his troops whispered otherwise. They began calling the green around them the throat. It wasn't a jungle, it was a thing. And it was swallowing them. Sergeant Morvek, a battle-hardened Tarkari with cybernetic limbs, was found disassembled. Not slain in combat, disassembled. His parts laid out in a neat, deliberate pattern on a tree platform 20 meters off the ground. No prints. No drag marks. No sound was recorded. He had screamed once. The rest was silence. By the end of the week, 34 units had vanished. Drones circled endlessly, batteries drained in hours, navigation corrupted. The Coalition's vaunted terrain stabilizers failed to clear more than a kilometer before being overtaken by vine and root. Atharuk stared at the holomap, which refused to hold shape. Every rendered topography warped by the hour. "Why aren't we seeing resistance?" he barked. His command staff looked at each other. No gunfire. No explosions. No sign of any structured military opposition. Just men vanishing. Equipment dying. Sanity fraying. The answer came in a low-band radio intercept. A voice, garbled by the weather and distance, but unmistakably human, pierced through the static. "You're not in a jungle. You're in our house." General Atharok froze. Not because of the message, but the accent. He didn't recognize the language, but the tone carried weight. Authority. Calm, precise malice. He ordered full lockdown. Reinforcements would arrive in 2 planetary cycles. They just had to hold ground. But there was no ground to hold. That night, it rained. Not the weak, steady precipitation of terraformed worlds. This was a tropical wall of water, thunder that made steel resonate, lightning that cracked trees in half, wind that turned drones into shrapnel. The jungle roared with insects, frogs, unseen creatures that hissed and screamed like tortured metal. And amid that chaos, Atharok's second-in-command vanished from inside a locked command tent. The jungle had not merely welcomed them, it had invited them to die slowly. Above the tree line, unseen, men watched. Still as the branches they clung to, faces streaked with clay and camouflage, breath synchronized with the pulse of the canopy. One of them whispered into a throat, "MIC. Targets in disarray. Jungle's working. Commence ghost walk." No response came back. They didn't need one. Captain Elias Vance moved through the undergrowth like a ghost, every muscle honed by years surviving terrains that chewed up lesser men. His squad followed, unseen shadows stitched into the flesh of the jungle. They were the Jangle Special Forces, Earth's answer to a galaxy that thought sophistication lived only in circuitry and glass cities. Here, in the green cathedral of ancient trees and breathing earth, humanity was at its most dangerous. The squad's orders were simple: repel the coalition incursion by any means necessary. But Jangle training didn't focus on overwhelming force, it taught patience, misdirection, and psychological ruin. You didn't beat the enemy with bigger guns. You turned their minds against them, broke them quietly, and let the wilderness finish what you began. Vance crouched near a knotted root system, peering through infrared goggles modified to filter through the jungle's thermal noise. Coalition soldiers staggered below, armor gleaming even through layers of grime, expressions tight with exhaustion and fear. They moved in tight clusters now, isolated units had simply ceased returning. Private Rear Santoro, perched above in the vines like some predatory cat, tapped her throat MIC twice. 2 taps, unescorted officer sighted. Vance smiled grimly beneath his camo paint. They had learned quickly that officers died last. It forced their forces to splinter, to argue, to question every command. It seeded doubt where fear blossomed. He gave the signal. A faint rustle, easily masked by the heavy rainfall, and Santoro dropped a snare vine, woven with natural toxins, around the officer's neck. Before his bodyguards could react, she was gone, swallowed back into the canopy. The officer's spasmodic thrashing was horrifyingly quiet. The bodyguards turned in a frantic circle, firing blind into shadows. Vance slipped through the chaos, planting sonic grenades tuned not to destroy but to unnerve. Bursts of distorted, almost human screams echoed between the trees. Somewhere behind him, Mendez and Tikar, 2 of the squad's best sappers, detonated a beehive trap, hundreds of genetically enhanced hornets, each carrying a neurotoxin designed for rapid paralysis. The coalition squad broke ranks. Panic wasn't just a tool, it was a contagion. In the jungle, panic didn't attract predators. It created them. Jangle wasn't the name of their squad by accident. The first generation of operators had learned to jangle the enemy's senses, sow confusion, distort reality, twist the familiar into nightmare. It wasn't enough to kill. You made them question if they had ever been alive at all. Vance regrouped with Santoro under the bent arch of a fallen kapok tree. Rain dripped down their faces, blending sweat, mud, and blood into the same gritty mask. She signed silently, "Mission complete, 1 KIA, 4 fled west." Vance nodded, his eyes hard. They couldn't allow even the fleeing ones to survive too long. Fear needed a mouthpiece. Corpses whispered less effectively than men who had seen demons and lived. Phase 2, Vance murmured. Santoro grinned, a feral flash in the dimness, and melted away. Elsewhere, Deeper into the Coalition's improvised base, Lieutenant Ryan Asori leaned over a tactical display that made no sense anymore. Blips appeared and vanished. Supply lines cut without a single explosion. Maps warped by sudden floods and land shifts the satellites failed to predict. He had led ground campaigns on 15 worlds. He had never seen anything like this. A technician burst into the command tent, water pouring from his uniform. "Sir, secondary comms relay is down." Again. No visual confirmation of the saboteurs. Ryan wiped his face with trembling hands. "Deploy remaining sentries. Triple patrol rotations." "They're exhausted, sir." "So are we." His voice cracked. "Move." He didn't dare mention the rumors running like poison through the ranks, whispers of Earth's cursed soldiers, human predators who could disappear into a handful of leaves, who could kill with nothing more than a feathered dart or a twisted root. It sounded insane. But then again, so did the bodies they found stripped of armor and arranged in ritualistic patterns no battlefield AI could interpret. Vance watched through broken foliage as the Coalition moved their patrols tighter, shrinking their operational perimeter. It was a predictable response. A fearful one. He clicked his MIC twice, paused, then 3 times. Signal for environmental escalation. Mendez answered by triggering a mudslide precisely engineered along a naturally unstable ridge. Within seconds, an entire comms outpost was swallowed, torn apart by a wall of living earth and debris. No Coalition soldier ever saw the charge go off, the very world seemed to devour them. Vance exhaled slowly, scanning the reactions. Frantic radio chatter flooded open frequencies. Pleas for extraction. Requests for exorcists, in 3 different Coalition dialects. Good. He didn't hate them, these offworlders. He didn't blame them for their arrogance. If you lived your whole life in sanitized atmospheres and hexagonal cities, Earth must seem like a nightmare. But nightmares weren't meant to be conquered. They were meant to be survived, if you were lucky. As the rain slackened, the jungle took on a strange, almost reverent quiet. Vance signaled the squad to regroup. They moved with a grace born not of training but of something older, something primal that no VR simulation could replicate. When they gathered under a natural canopy, dripping and breathing slow to conserve energy, Vance finally spoke. "Tonight we ghost harder. Push them until they forget why they ever set foot here." A low murmur of assent rippled through the team. No bravado. No cheering. Just grim, silent purpose. The war was not yet won, but it was no longer fought with weapons or numbers. It was fought with fear. And Earth was very good at being afraid of nothing. The Coalition's final weapon arrived in silence. Its descent through Earth's atmosphere left no trail, no fire, just a shift in the pressure of the air that made birds go still and insects fall quiet. Designated the Sovereign Fang, it was less a mech than a fortress on legs, self-regulating, terrain-adaptive, with AI capable of rewriting its strategies in real time. It didn't deploy troops. It consumed threats. General Atharok, now gaunt and sleepless, stood beside it in the flooded remnants of the forward base. His eyes no longer burned with arrogance, only a twitching desperation. "Sweep the jungle," he commanded. "Reduce it to patternless ash." The Fang obeyed, striding into the tree line, sensors humming through multiple spectrums. It broadcast subsonic pulses meant to flush hidden targets and scramble nervous systems. But the jungle did not respond like other environments. It didn't flee. It adapted. In a clearing several kilometers ahead, Elias Vance crouched with his squad, watching the machine's glacial approach. He could hear the soft tremor in the soil, feel it in his bones. He signaled to Mendez and Santoro without words. They knew the plan. No direct engagement. Deconstruction, layer by layer. "The thing's got legs taller than trees," Santoro muttered. "We bring it down or die under it." Vance slid a knotted rope of vines from his shoulder. "We won't die. It will." Their countermeasures were not brute force. They were intimate, spatial manipulation and organic sabotage. They flooded the path ahead with engineered fungus spores, which would coat the Fang's intakes and sensors. Mendez reproposed a fallen satellite dish to reflect the mecha's sonar back at itself, causing false positives. T-Car rigged the surrounding canopy with tensile lianas strong enough to hold an armored tank, but more importantly, flexible enough to confuse AI motion analysis. As the Fang reached the killing field, the jungle narrowed. Its legs triggered movement beneath the soil, sinkholes crafted over days by the squad, shallow enough to tilt, not trap. One misstep. Then another. The great machine hesitated, stabilizers whirring. Optical units flashed uncertain yellow. Vance raised his signal flare. Just 1 second of hesitation, that's all a predator needs. With a crack and a guttural groan, a column of trees, pre-cut and winched into position with gravity-sensitive triggers, fell across its side. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to blind a flank. Then came the fire. A swarm of bioluminescent insects, bred for rapid reproduction and light sensitivity, poured from a hive Mendez had cultivated in silence. They overwhelmed exposed optics. Every nanosecond the mech recalculated was one where it wasn't killing. And then it stepped backward, onto a plate covered in jungle resin and metal scrap. The explosion wasn't massive, but precise. The joint at the back of its left foreleg buckled. The sovereign Fang fell. It didn't scream. Machines don't. But the sound of its collapse echoed for miles, long after the jungle had reclaimed the clearing. Later that night, as torch bugs lit the canopy and the air cooled, Vance stood over the broken chassis. He reached out and touched it, still warm, still humming, like a creature not yet aware it was dead. "You should have stayed in orbit," he said softly. Far away, General Atharok watched the live feed cut to black. Static pulsed for a long moment. Then the screen changed. A figure appeared, camouflaged in leaves, clay, and moss, face almost indistinguishable from the jungle behind him. Vance. He looked into the Coalition's lens, calm and rooted like the tree beside him. "You sent machines into a world you don't understand," he said. "You wanted to tame a wilderness that's never asked for masters." A pause. Behind him, the jungle rustled, not with fear, but with breath, with life. "You thought Earth was weak because we don't build shining towers or strip the sky clean. But our strength is older than steel. You brought fire into our home. We answered." He leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Don't come back." The feed cut. The silence afterward was absolute. The Coalition's withdrawal began before the next sunrise. Uncoordinated, frantic, but absolute. The jungle swallowed their landing sites. By the time Earth's orbital sensors could track their ships, most were already gone. Word spread. Across borderless galaxies and within the depth of forgotten stations, stories of Earth's wrath bled into rumor, into legend. Not of their technology, laughable, by galactic standards, but of their will. Of soldiers who hunted machines barefoot. Of terrain that defied science. Of a wilderness that lived, and men who listened to it. Back on Earth, weeks later, Vance stood where the Fang had fallen. Vines already grew across its carcass, flowers blooming in the cracks. Nature did not mourn war. It reproposed it. Santoro joined him, silent for a while. "Then, think they'll try again." "They'll think about it," Vance said. "And then they'll remember what thinking got them." They stood there, still and untroubled, as the jungle breathed around them. The enemy had left. The war had ended. But Earth never slept. And Jangle waited. Weeks passed, and silence returned, not peace, but something quieter, more watchful. Above the canopy, satellites drifted in low orbit, blinking back at Earth with cautious curiosity. Coalition vessels lingered just beyond the atmosphere, maintaining what they called observation neutrality. But the war was over. For now. Captain Elias Vance no longer wore his uniform. The jungle didn't recognize rank. He moved in civilian gear, half covered in natural dyes and layered fabrics that breathed with the land. The Jangle team had splintered, as planned. Not disbanded, just dispersed. Blending into villages, river outposts, and deep terrain shelters, becoming myths again. He trekked alone this morning, machete sheathed, eyes scanning the undergrowth not for threats, but for signs. The earth spoke, if you knew how to read it. Tree roots curled differently where explosives had once been hidden. Animal sounds shifted when metal seeped into the soil. Even the ants remembered war. They moved in paths that avoided the carcass of the sovereign fang. Vance reached the clearing where the machine had fallen. Now, it was no longer a monument to conflict. It was a garden. Fungi bloomed from its joints. Vines wrapped its armor like ceremonial cloth. Birds nested in the crooks of its twisted antennae. He wasn't here to mourn. He was here because of the radio. 2 nights prior, a signal had broken through on a dead frequency. Not coalition standard. Not military. Something older, shortwave, analog. Just a handful of words, repeated in bursts. They are coming. Not coalition. Worse. No coordinates. No ID. But the voice had been human. And it had spoken with the urgency of someone who didn't expect to survive the transmission. Now, as wind shifted and sunlight speared through the canopy in golden shafts, Vance crouched and unpacked a signal tracer cobbled together from scavenged gear. Santoro had helped him tune it, but refused to come. "I've got a bad feeling," she'd said. "Something's shifted out there. Feels like the jungle's listening again, but not for us this time." The tracer pulsed faintly. 1 ping. Then 2. Eastward. Deeper than any coalition map had dared to probe. Beyond the basalt ridges where tectonic heat warped magnetic readings. No drone had ever returned from that far. He rose slowly. Decision weighed heavier than exhaustion. He could return, report, let someone else follow the trail. But he knew the truth in his bones. He was already walking toward it. That was what it meant to be Jangle. You didn't wait for storms. You walked into them. 12 kilometers east, buried under a ridge like a slumbering beast, something shifted. It was not coalition. Not machine. It pulsed with heat signatures that confused senses, mimicked seismic activity with breath-like intervals, and sent sporadic electromagnetic bursts like a failing star. But there was rhythm in the chaos. Intelligence. Intention. The first one to find it wasn't a soldier. Amora Nyack, a biologist stationed near the Mekong fringe, had hiked alone into the wilds looking for evidence of post-conflict ecosystem disruption. Instead, she'd found a crater. She didn't remember falling. Only the sudden, awful pull of gravity that didn't come from below but from everywhere. Her boots skidded on obsidian glass, her eyes watering from a smell she couldn't name, like lightning trapped in oil. Then it blinked at her. Not light. Not eyes. Just awareness. She ran. Hours later, soaked and trembling, she burst into the nearest ranger station and gasped a single word before collapsing. Awake. The next day, Vance stood where she'd pointed. And what he saw made even his pulse slow. At the base of the ridge was a spire, half buried, humming in discordant tones. Not metal. Not stone. Something else. Organic and machine-bound in ways that defied taxonomy. It was watching. And it had been watching. He called Santoro on a secure line. "It's not over," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "They weren't invading us. They were hiding something. Or testing the waters." "Coalition." "No," he looked down the ridge again. "This is older." He ended the call. Behind him, wind stirred the leaves like whispers. The jungle didn't feel afraid. It felt expectant. As if it, too, had been waiting for something deeper than war. Something that lived below memory. Vance didn't turn away. He'd never been trained to. The thing beneath the earth had waited for visitors. Now it wanted contact.